We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations. Victor Reeves built things to last. His construction company, Reeve Development, stood as testament to that philosophy. 30 years of perfect structural integrity, 0 lawsuits, and a reputation as solid as the foundations he poured. At 58, his hands remained calloused despite his executive position, his shoulders broad from years of labor before he could afford to hire others. Victor, the Parkview Mall contract is waiting. Donna, his assistant of 15 years, placed a folder on his desk. Thanks. Any word from Olivia? Victor asked, his voice softening at his daughter's name. Nothing yet. Donna gave him a sympathetic look before leaving. Victor opened his desk drawer, pulling out the wedding invitation. Embossed lettering announced his only daughter's marriage to Benjamin Howell in 2 weeks. The invitation had arrived via mail rather than from Olivia herself, their first communication in 8 months. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. Marlene, rehearsal dinner reservation confirmed. Don't be late tomorrow. 32 years of marriage, and their communication had devolved to functional text messages. Victor couldn't pinpoint exactly when Marlene had grown distant. Perhaps around the time he'd expanded the business 5 years ago, when 16-hour workdays meant missed anniversaries and cold dinners. Or maybe earlier, when Olivia left for college and the empty nest revealed how little they had in common anymore. Mr. Reeves, his son-in-law-to-be, stood in the doorway, looking nervous in an expensive suit that didn't quite fit his lanky frame. Ben, didn't expect to see you until tomorrow. Victor gestured to a chair. I wanted to speak with you privately. Ben sat, his knee bouncing. About the wedding arrangements. Victor leaned forward. Is there a problem with my contribution? The check cleared last week. No, sir. The money's fine. It's about the seating. Seating. Olivia wanted me to prepare you. Ben swallowed hard. You're not seated with the family during the ceremony or at the reception. Victor's face remained impassive, but his hand tightened around his pen. I'm paying for half the wedding. I know, sir. But Olivia feels. She says you weren't there for her growing up. Always working. And there are other factors. Ben trailed off. What other factors? Sir, with respect, that's between you and your family. Victor stood, walking to the window overlooking the Minneapolis skyline. My daughter is ashamed of me. Is that it? The self-made contractor embarrasses her in front of her lawyer friends. No, it's not that. Ben hesitated. Look, I shouldn't be in the middle of this. But I respect what you've built, how you provided for your family. I just thought you deserved a warning. After Ben left, Victor called his investigator. Augustine Walsh had been handling background checks for Reeves Development for a decade. Augie, I need personal surveillance, not business. My wife. Everything okay, Victor? That's what I'm paying you to find out. That evening, Victor entered his Edina home to find Marlene on the phone, laughing in a way he hadn't heard directed at him in years. She startled when she saw him, quickly ending the call. Who was that? He asked. Lisa. Wedding details. She brushed past him toward the kitchen. Victor knew Lisa Parker had been in Barbados for the past week. He'd seen her vacation photos on Marlene's Facebook page that morning. Any mail from Olivia? He asked instead of challenging the lie. No, she's busy with the wedding. Marlene busied herself with dinner preparations. I told you not to push her about that promotion for Ben at your company. She thinks you're trying to buy their affection. I was offering opportunity, not charity. You always think you can fix everything with money or favors. Marlene slammed a pot onto the stove. Not everything works that way, Victor. Later that night, Victor's phone chimed with a text from Augie. Found something. Meeting tomorrow, 7 a.m. As Marlene slept beside him, Victor stared at the ceiling, mentally reviewing the contracts he'd signed over 30 years. The one he'd entered with the woman beside him suddenly seemed the most precarious structure he'd ever built. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Foundation. At sunrise, Victor sat across from Augie in a downtown diner, watching steam rise from black coffee as photographs spread between them. She's been meeting him 3 times a week for at least 2 months, Augie said, tapping a clear image of Marlene entering the Lake Calhoun Towers. His name is Theodore Walsh. No relation to me. Augie added wryly. Professor of literature at the university. Victor's expression remained unchanged as he studied a photo of Marlene laughing with a silver-haired man on a restaurant patio. How long has she known him? That's where it gets interesting. I found alumni newsletters going back 5 years with both their names listed for fundraising committees. Augie slid another photo across the table. Marlene and Theodore at university event. Victor conspicuously absent. But there's more. Your daughter's wedding planner? She's Theodore's niece. Victor's jaw tightened imperceptibly. And the seating arrangements? Theodore is invited. Table 3 at the reception. That's the family table. Victor nodded once, gathering the photos. Continue surveillance. I want to know every meeting, every call. Victor, Augie hesitated. What are you planning? Planning? I'm gathering information. That's all. That evening, the rehearsal dinner unfolded with orchestrated perfection at the Hazelwood, Minneapolis's premier venue. Victor watched Marlene move through the room, touching shoulders, laughing at jokes, never staying beside him for more than a moment. She'd chosen his tie, conservative blue, while she wore a dress he'd never seen, deep burgundy that revealed more than it concealed. Olivia barely acknowledged him, directing her smiles and conversation to Marlene and Ben's family. When she did approach, it was with the practiced cordiality of a politician. Dad, thank you for organizing this. She gestured to the room, but didn't quite meet his eyes. Anything for you, Olivia. He searched her face for the little girl who once rode on his shoulders around construction sites. Are you happy? With Ben, with everything? Something flickered across her face. Doubt? Regret? But it vanished quickly. Ben is wonderful. Everything is exactly as it should be. Her rehearsed response felt like drywall covering structural damage. As waiters served champagne, Victor noticed Theodore Walsh enter through a side door. The professor moved with casual confidence, nodding to several guests before taking a seat at the table reserved for Olivia's university mentors. Marlene's eyes tracked Theodore's movement before darting away when she sensed Victor watching. Victor raised his glass for the traditional father's toast. The room quieted. To Olivia and Ben, he began. When Olivia was 7, she fell from the treehouse. I built her. I wasn't there. I was working. Marlene called, and I left $1 million negotiation to take her to the hospital. He paused, looking directly at his daughter. She had a concussion. While we waited for the doctor, she asked me, Daddy, why do you build things for everyone else, but you're never home to build things with me? The room grew uncomfortably silent. I didn't have a good answer then. I thought providing meant protecting. I thought absence was justified by intention. Victor's voice remained steady. But foundations matter. What we build upon determines what survives. He turned slightly toward where Theodore sat. And what looks solid can harbor hidden weaknesses that, when revealed, collapse everything we believed was secure. He raised his glass higher. To foundations that last. To truths that endure. To my daughter and her choice of partner. The toast received scattered, confused applause. Marlene's smile had frozen in place. Later, as guests began to leave, Victor overheard Marlene speaking with Theodore in a service corridor. He knows something, she whispered urgently. Impossible. We've been careful, Theodore reassured her. You don't know him like I do. That toast wasn't random. The wedding is tomorrow. After that, timing won't matter. Victor stepped back silently, his suspicions confirmed. That night, he added a significant codicil to his will, made 3 phone calls, and transferred funds between accounts. By morning, everything would be in place. As he entered their bedroom, Marlene was already in bed, pretending to sleep. Victor stood in the doorway, watching her measured breathing. I built this house, he said quietly. Every nail, every board I selected personally. Marlene remained still, but her breathing changed. Do you know why I insisted on overseeing the construction myself? He continued. Because I know where every weakness is. I know exactly how it would fall apart if stressed in the right places. He turned off the light and left her in darkness, sleeping instead in his home office. Chapter 3. The Collapse. The morning of Olivia's wedding arrived with perfect spring weather. Victor dressed meticulously in his custom-tailored suit, the envelope containing his daughter's wedding gift, a deed to a lakeside property, tucked inside his jacket. Marlene had left early to help Olivia prepare, her goodbye perfunctory and distracted. When Victor arrived at the church, guests were already being seated. He nodded to business associates, shook hands with distant relatives, and followed an usher who seemed increasingly uncomfortable. "Sir, your seat is—" The young man hesitated, glancing at his clipboard. "Show me," Victor said simply. The usher led him through the main sanctuary, past the front rows reserved for immediate family, beyond the middle section for close friends, all the way to the back corner of the church near a side exit where coat racks stood. A single chair had been placed there, apart from all other seating, with a clear view of a support pillar, but little else. "There must be a mistake," the usher mumbled. "No mistake." Victor sat down, his face impassive. "Thank you." As guests filled the sanctuary, several noticed Victor's isolated position. Whisper spread. A business partner tried to invite him to sit with his family, but Victor declined with a slight shake of his head. Then Marlene appeared, radiant in mother-of-the-bride blue, escorted down the aisle to her front row seat. She scanned the room, finally spotting Victor in his corner. Their eyes locked, and the corner of her mouth lifted in what could only be described as a smirk. "Guess you don't count," she mouthed, visible only to him, before turning to smile at those around her. In that moment, something calcified in Victor. He stood, straightened his jacket, took the envelope from his inside pocket, and walked steadily down the aisle. He placed the envelope on the gift table, nodded to the startled wedding coordinator, and exited the church without looking back. Outside, he called to Augie. "Execute Plan B. All of it." "Victor, are you sure?" "Once this starts." "I'm sure." "Begin now." Victor drove to his office building, taking the elevator to the top floor where his corner office commanded a view of the city he'd helped build. He unlocked his desk drawer and removed a flash drive, plugging it into his computer. The files contained every piece of evidence Augie had gathered: photographs, bank statements, hotel receipts, and phone records documenting Marlene's 2-year affair with Theodore. But more damning were the emails between Marlene, Theodore, and Olivia, planning what they called the transition. "After the wedding, I'll tell him about the divorce," Marlene had written. "Theodore's already found buyers interested in Victor's company. With my 50% ownership, we won't need his consent." "Dad's stubborn," Olivia had replied. "He won't sell just because you ask. That's why we need leverage," Theodore's response explained. "The evidence I've manufactured regarding the Westlake project irregularities will convince him. He'll sell rather than face an investigation, even a baseless one." Victor stared at the messages, the betrayal complete. His wife, his daughter, and her mentor had conspired not just to humiliate him, but to destroy everything he'd built. His phone rang. "Marlene." "Where are you?" she demanded. "You're embarrassing Olivia." "I think you've handled the embarrassment without my help," Victor replied calmly. "What are you talking about? Get back here now." "No, Marlene. I won't be coming back. Not to the wedding. Not to the house." "Victor, stop being dramatic. Check your phone. I've just sent you something." He heard her breathing change as she received the file. Screenshots of the conspiracy, evidence of the affair, bank records showing Theodore's financial troubles, and the money he'd borrowed from departmental funds. "Victor, wait." Her voice had lost its edge, panic replacing confidence. "Goodbye, Marlene." As he ended the call, Victor received a text from Augie, package delivered to university president and board members. Local news has documentation of professors' embezzlement allegations. FBI contact confirmed receipt of evidence. Victor looked out at the skyline. By tomorrow, Theodore Walsh would be under investigation. By next week, Marlene would discover that Victor had transferred their assets to protected accounts days earlier. And Olivia would learn that the family property she and Theodore had planned to sell was no longer in her mother's name. His phone buzzed continuously with calls and texts, but Victor turned it off, watching instead as a storm front moved toward the city. Somewhere across town, at a wedding he'd paid for but wasn't welcome to attend, the truth was emerging. He imagined Marlene's face going pale as everything collapsed around her. Victor Reeves had built things to last, including his revenge. And he was just getting started. Chapter 4, Aftershocks. 3 days after the wedding that never completed, Victor sat in attorney Samuel Blackthorne's office reviewing documents. The wedding had dissolved into chaos after Victor's exit and the subsequent revelations. Olivia had fled the church in tears. Theodore had received a call from the university president during the ceremony, and Marlene had stood alone at the altar, her phone displaying evidence of her betrayal as guests murmured in confusion. "Legally, you're on solid ground," Samuel said, adjusting his glasses. "Minnesota is an equitable distribution state, not community property. Given the evidence of Marlene's affair and conspiracy to defraud you of business assets, she'll be lucky to get 20% in the divorce." "I don't want her to get anything," Victor stated flatly. "That's not realistic, but we can minimize." "What's not realistic is thinking I'll negotiate with people who planned to destroy me." Victor's voice remained steady, but his eyes hardened. "What's the status of the restraining orders?" Samuel consulted another file. "Temporary orders granted against both Marlene and Theodore. They can't enter your properties or contact you directly. And the business? Your recent restructuring was perfectly timed. Moving 60% of company ownership to the employee stock program before all this happened means Marlene can only claim against your remaining 40% share. Even then, the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause severely limits her claim." Victor nodded. The prenup had been Marlene's idea 32 years ago when she thought Victor had more to lose. The irony wasn't lost on him. "What about Theodore?" Victor asked. "Federal investigation is proceeding. The university placed him on administrative leave pending outcome. His accounts are frozen." Samuel hesitated. "Victor, he's facing serious charges. This goes beyond revenge into potential criminal prosecution." "Good. And your daughter?" Victor's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on the armrest. "What about her?" "She's called my office 6 times. Says it was all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding." Victor repeated the word flatly. "She conspired with them for months. She seated me by the coat racks." "She's still your daughter?" "No. She made her choice." As Victor left the attorney's office, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Reeves?" A young man's voice, shaking slightly. "It's Ben. Benjamin Howell." Victor remained silent. "Sir, please don't hang up. I had no idea what they were planning. Olivia told me you two were estranged because you disapproved of me. I swear I didn't know about Theodore or the business takeover plans." "Why are you calling, Ben?" "I've left Olivia. The wedding's off permanently." Ben's voice steadied. "And I thought you should know they're planning something else. I overheard Olivia on the phone with Theodore. They mentioned something called Project Demolition." Victor's jaw tightened. Project Demolition was the code name for Reeves Development's most ambitious project, a major redevelopment of Minneapolis's warehouse district, still in confidential planning stages. "Thank you for the information," Victor said. "Sir, I'm sorry about everything. You didn't deserve what they did." After ending the call, Victor contacted Augie immediately. "I need surveillance on my executive team. Someone's leaking confidential information." "Already on it," Augie replied. "I installed additional security protocols last week. Anyone accessing Project Demolition files leaves digital fingerprints." "Good. And Marlene? She's staying with her sister in St. Paul. Tried to access your joint accounts this morning. Discovered they're frozen. Made 17 calls to her lawyer." "Theodore, that's interesting. He went to the university late last night, broke into his own office. Campus security caught him deleting files from his computer. They've added tampering with evidence to his charges." Victor drove to his lake house, the one property Marlene didn't know about, purchased through a holding company 3 years earlier. As he walked through the empty rooms, his phone buzzed with a text from his VP of operations. Emergency board meeting called by minority shareholders. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Victor knew what this meant. Theodore and Marlene had found another angle of attack. Despite his controlling interest through the employee stock program, a vote of no confidence from minority shareholders could cause significant disruption. He made 3 calls that night to his banker, his largest subcontractor, and the mayor of Minneapolis. By morning, he had the ammunition he needed. At 8:45 a.m., Victor walked into the Reeve Development Conference Room to find several board members already seated, including Tyler Forrester, Marlene's cousin, who owned 5% of the company. Tyler couldn't meet Victor's eyes. "Good morning," Victor said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "I understand this meeting was called without my knowledge." "Victor," Tyler began nervously, "some concerns have been raised about the direction of the company." "By whom?" "Several shareholders feel that Project Demolition represents an unacceptable risk." "Interesting." Victor opened his laptop. "Before we continue, I should inform everyone that as of 8:30 this morning, First National Bank has approved a $50 million line of credit for Project Demolition. The mayor's office has expedited all remaining permits, and McDermott Construction has signed on as our primary subcontractor, reducing costs by 15%. The room fell silent. "Oh, and one more thing." Victor projected an email onto the wall screen. "This message, sent from this building to Theodore Walsh yesterday, contains confidential company information. The sender used an anonymous account, but our IT security captured the device ID." He clicked to reveal a log showing the device belonged to Tyler Forrester. "Tyler, you're fired. Security is waiting to escort you out. The company will be pressing charges for corporate espionage." Tyler paled. "Victor, please," Marlene said. "It would just apply pressure for a fair settlement." "Remove him," Victor told security who had entered the room. As Tyler was led away, Victor addressed the remaining board members. "Any other concerns about the company's direction?" None were raised. That evening, Victor received a call from Augie. Theodore tried to leave the country. Customs stopped him at the airport. Apparently, the FBI had flagged his passport. Augie paused, and Olivia came to your house. When she couldn't get in, she spray-painted Tyrant across the garage door. "Have her arrested for vandalism." "Victor, she's your daughter." "No." Victor's voice was ice. "She's just another person who made the mistake of betraying me." Chapter 5, Counterattack. 2 weeks after the wedding debacle, Minneapolis was abuzz with rumors. The prestigious Professor Theodore Walsh under federal investigation. The society marriage of Olivia Reeves and Benjamin Howell collapsed before it began. And Victor Reeves, once a respected but relatively private businessman, now the subject of whispered conversations at every social gathering. In the penthouse suite of the Clarion Hotel, Marlene, Theodore, and Olivia gathered for a strategy session. Theodore's distinguished appearance had deteriorated. Unshaven, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "The university board votes tomorrow on whether to terminate me," he said, pacing the room. "My attorney says the evidence against me is substantial." "It's all fabricated," Marlene insisted. "Victor manipulated those financial records. Fabricated or not, it's damning." Theodore collapsed into an armchair. 30 years of academic reputation destroyed in a week. Olivia, still wearing her engagement ring despite Ben's departure, scrolled through her phone. The company stock took a hit after Dad fired Uncle Tyler, but it's rebounding. Project Demolition is getting positive press. "We need leverage," Marlene said, her voice hardening. Victor's weakness has always been his reputation. He cares what people think about his work. "What are you suggesting?" Theodore asked. "I still have friends at the Star Tribune. What if we plant a story questioning the safety of Reeves' development projects? Not an outright accusation, just concerns raised by anonymous sources." "That's dangerous territory," Theodore warned. "Defamation laws. Not if we're careful with the wording." Marlene's eyes gleamed with determination. "And I know exactly which project to target." Meanwhile, across town, Victor reviewed security footage with Augie in the Reeves development server room. They accessed the Project Demolition servers from 3 different locations. Augie explained, pointing to the screen. "Sophisticated approach. They used Tyler's credentials but routed through various VPNs." "What do they take?" "Preliminary soil, testing reports, structural diagrams, safety projections. Nothing that would make sense to a layperson." Victor nodded. "They're looking for vulnerabilities. Anything they could exploit or misrepresent." The soil reports from the West Quadrant showed some contamination issues we're addressing in the remediation phase, Augie noted. In isolation, those numbers could look concerning. They're planning a media hit, Victor concluded. Prepare a comprehensive response package. All environmental clearances, updated soil tests, third-party safety certifications. And contact Isabel Kane, the journalist. She's not exactly friendly to developers. Exactly. She's respected for her integrity. If she reports that our project exceeds safety standards after initial concerns, no one will question it. Augie hesitated. There's something else. Olivia has been inquiring about your medical records. Victor's expression darkened. My medical records? She contacted Dr. Simon's office, claiming to be concerned about your heart condition and stress levels. I don't have a heart condition. Precisely. But if she's looking for health information, they want to paint me as mentally unstable. The grieving husband having a breakdown, lashing out irrationally. Victor's voice remained calm, but his eyes flashed. That won't work either. The next morning, Victor was in the middle of a meeting when his assistant burst in. Sir, you need to see this. She handed him her tablet, displaying the Star Tribune website. The headline read, Safety Concerns Shadow Major Minneapolis Development Project. The article quoted sources close to Reeves Development, expressing alarm over potential contamination and structural risks at the Warehouse District site. Though carefully worded to avoid direct accusations, the implications were clear. Victor Reeves might be cutting corners, endangering public safety. Victor scanned the byline. Fiona Wells, a junior reporter known to be friends with Marlene's niece. Before he could respond, his phone rang with a call from the mayor's office. Victor, what the hell is this? Mayor Gwendolyn Diaz demanded. I put my political capital behind expediting your permits. And now there are safety allegations. It's a hit piece, Gwen. My ex-wife's work. Ex-wife? The divorce isn't even filed yet. Technicality. I've already sent your office the complete environmental and structural reports. The site exceeds federal safety standards by 40%. The timing is suspicious, Victor. The city council meets tomorrow to finalize the tax incentive package, which is exactly why this article appeared today. Tell the council I'll personally guarantee the environmental remediation costs if any issues arise. After ending the call, Victor summoned his PR director and legal team. Within 2 hours, they had prepared a comprehensive response, including statements from 3 independent engineering firms who had reviewed the project plans. But Marlene's counteroffensive had only begun. By afternoon, local TV news was reporting on a potential public health risk at the development site. An anonymous source claimed that cancer-causing chemicals had been detected in groundwater samples. A complete fabrication, but damaging nonetheless. Then Victor's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Important. The message contained a video file and a brief note, recorded yesterday at the Clarion. Thought you should know. B. Victor opened the video to see Marlene, Theodore, and Olivia in a hotel suite, planning their media strategy against him. We don't need proof, Marlene was saying. We just need doubt. Once the city pulls back, Victor will have to negotiate. What about the actual safety reports? Olivia asked. No one reads the corrections, Theodore assured her. The damage is done with the initial headline. And if all else fails, Marlene added, we have the medical angle. A few suggestions about Victor's unstable behavior since his heart episode last year. But he never had a heart episode, Olivia pointed out. Again, perception matters more than reality. Marlene's smile was cold. By the time he disproves it, we'll have forced him to the negotiating table. Victor closed the video, recognizing Ben's voice briefly heard in the background. The young man had chosen his side. Within minutes, Victor had dispatched the video to Mayor Diaz, his attorney, and Isabel Kane at the Minneapolis Tribune, the Star Tribune's main competitor. He included a brief message, no comment needed from me. The footage speaks for itself. 2 hours later, Isabel Kane published an explosive article titled, Anatomy of a Smear Campaign. Hidden camera reveals plot against local businessman. The piece included stills from the video, complete safety documentation for the warehouse project, and a scathing indictment of the tactics employed against Victor. By evening, the Star Tribune had retracted its original story, and the TV station had issued an apology. Mayor Diaz called to confirm the tax incentive package would proceed as planned. That night, Victor received another text from Ben. They know I recorded them. I've moved to a hotel. Olivia is threatening legal action against me. Victor replied, send me your location. My security team will ensure your safety. As Victor prepared for bed in his lake house, his phone rang again. Olivia. Dad, we need to talk, she began, her voice conciliatory. Things have gotten out of hand. Have they? Seems to me they've gone exactly according to plan. Just not yours. Dad, please. I made a mistake. I didn't understand what Mom and Theodore were planning. Victor remained silent. Can we meet? Just you and me? She pleaded. I want to explain. There's nothing to explain, Olivia. You chose your side at the wedding. You sat me by the coat racks. That was Mom's idea. I just went along because. Goodbye, Olivia. Victor ended the call, then sent a text to Augie. Increase surveillance on all three of them. They're getting desperate. Across town, in the Clarion suite, Marlene hurled her phone against the wall after reading the Tribune article. How'd he get that video? She screamed. Who was recording us? Theodore sat with his head in his hands. The university board voted unanimously to terminate me. 30 years of work gone. Olivia paced the room. He wouldn't even talk to me. My own father. Marlene turned on her, eyes blazing. Because you couldn't convince Ben to stick with the plan. Now he's working with Victor against us. Don't blame me for this mess. Olivia shot back. This was your affair, your idea to turn Dad's company into your retirement plan. As they argued, none of them noticed the small device attached beneath the suite's coffee table, transmitting every word to Victor's security team. Chapter 6, Pressure Points. 1 month after the wedding disaster, Victor sat across from Samuel Blackthorne, reviewing the latest developments in his war against those who had betrayed him. Theodore Walsh's preliminary hearing is set for next month, Samuel reported. The university's internal audit uncovered additional financial irregularities spanning 15 years. His attorney is pushing for a plea deal. No deals, Victor stated flatly. I've spoken with the prosecutor. Samuel raised an eyebrow. That's not typically how criminal cases work, Victor. The prosecutor happens to sit on the board of the Children's Hospital, where Reeves Development just committed to a pro bono expansion project. Victor's expression remained impassive. Coincidence? Samuel sighed. And the divorce proceedings? Marlene's attorney requested an emergency hearing for temporary support. Judge Watkins denied it after reviewing the evidence of conspiracy. Victor allowed himself a thin smile. Another coincidence. The judge's daughter works for the architectural firm we hired for Project Demolition. Victor, I'm obligated to advise you that influencing judicial proceedings. I'm simply conducting business as usual. If that business benefits people connected to my case, that's merely fortuitous timing. Samuel closed his folder. And Olivia? She's requested mediation. For the first time, emotion flickered across Victor's face before disappearing. No, she's your only child. She's dead to me. After leaving his attorney's office, Victor drove to the Warehouse District development site. Construction had begun the previous week, transforming the neglected area into what would become a mixed-use complex of residential, commercial, and green spaces, the crown jewel of Reeves Development. As he surveyed the site from his vehicle, Victor noticed a familiar figure speaking with the foreman, Olivia. He watched as she handed the man an envelope before walking toward the parking area. Victor intercepted her before she reached her car. This is private property, he said coldly. You're trespassing, Olivia, startled. Then composure settled over her features, the same expression Marlene often wore when preparing for confrontation. Dad, please. She looked thinner than at the wedding, dark circles under her eyes. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. What were you giving my foreman? Information he should have. She lifted her chin. The original environmental impact study for this site from 15 years ago. There's a discrepancy with your current reports. Victor's eyes narrowed. Where did you get that? I still have connections at City Hall from my internship. The report shows elevated levels of industrial chemicals that aren't mentioned in your current filings. Because remediation was completed 10 years ago under a previous developer. The current tests show no contamination. The public deserves to know the history. You're not concerned about the public, Olivia. You're trying to sabotage my project because your other tactics failed. Olivia's composure cracked. That's not fair. I'm trying to make things right. By continuing to work with Marlene and Theodore against me, I have recordings of your strategy meetings from 2 days ago. Her face paled. You're spying on us? I'm protecting myself from enemies. Victor's voice was ice, which is what you became when you chose their side. Dad, you don't understand. Mom said if I didn't help them, she'd... Olivia stopped abruptly. She'd what? Olivia looked away. Nothing. Forget it. No more games, Olivia. What leverage does Marlene have over you? She knows about the Anderson contract, Olivia whispered. From when I interned at your company. Victor remembered instantly. 3 years ago, Olivia had made a serious error in drafting contract terms for a major client, potentially costing the company millions. Victor had discovered and corrected the mistake before it was finalized, never telling Olivia how close she'd come to disaster. I knew about that error, Victor said. I fixed it. Olivia's head snapped up. You knew? But you never said anything. I was protecting you, like I always have. Mom said she'd tell everyone I almost bankrupted the company, that I'd never practice law again. Victor studied his daughter's face, seeing genuine fear. So your mother blackmailed you into betraying me. It wasn't like that at first. She just wanted me to convince you to sell the company for retirement. But then Theodore got involved, and everything escalated. Before Victor could respond, his phone rang. Augie. Not now, Victor answered curtly. Emergency, Augie replied. Marlene just filed a temporary restraining order against you, claiming threats and emotional abuse. Sheriff's deputies are on their way to serve you and confiscate your firearms. I don't own firearms. They don't know that. It's a pretext to search your properties. Victor ended the call, turning back to Olivia. Did you know your mother just filed false charges against me? Confusion crossed her face. What? No. She said she was meeting with her lawyer about the divorce settlement. She's escalating, using the system against me. Victor's jaw tightened. This ends now. He walked away, leaving Olivia calling after him. In his car, he contacted Samuel. Marlene's filed a TRO with false claims. I need immediate counteraction. On it. I'll meet the deputies at your house with our own filing. Where are you now? Heading to the Minneapolis Tribune. Isabel Kane gets an exclusive interview. The full story with evidence. For hours later, Victor sat in Isabel's office as she reviewed the extensive documentation he provided. Emails, financial records, surveillance photos, and audio recordings. This is extraordinary, she said, looking up from her computer. You've documented everything meticulously. I build things properly, Victor replied, including my case against them. Publishing this will destroy 3 lives, Isabel noted. Your wife's, her lover's, and your daughter's. Ex-wife, Victor corrected. And they chose destruction when they conspired against me. Isabel studied him. What about Olivia? The evidence suggests she was coerced. Victor's expression revealed nothing. She made her choice at the wedding. The coat rack incident. Yes. Isabel closed her laptop. I'll run the story tomorrow. Front page. As Victor left the Tribune offices, his phone rang with a blocked number. He answered cautiously. Mr. Reeves. Theodore's voice, slurred and desperate. We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. Please. Marlene's lost control. She's making wild accusations, threatening Olivia. The prosecutors have frozen my accounts. I can't even pay rent. Your problems don't concern me. You've won, don't you see? Theodore's voice cracked. You've destroyed us completely. What more do you want? Justice, Victor answered simply and ended the call. That evening, as Victor worked in his lake house study, the security system alerted him to movement on the property. The exterior cameras showed Marlene approaching the front door, clearly intoxicated, barely keeping her balance. Victor, she shouted, pounding on the door. I know you're in there. Face me, you coward. Victor activated the intercom. Marlene, you're violating the restraining order I have against you. Police have been notified. You think you've won? She laughed bitterly. You have no idea what's coming. No idea what I'm capable of. I know exactly what you're capable of. That's why you'll never get near me again. As police sirens sounded in the distance, Marlene stumbled back toward her car, shouting, "This isn't over, Victor. Not by a long shot." Victor watched the police intercept her before she could drive away. Administering a sobriety test, she clearly failed. As they handcuffed her, Victor turned away from the monitor, a cold satisfaction settling over him. His phone buzzed with a text from Ben. Olivia's in the hospital. Overdosed on sleeping pills. Not sure if accidental. For the first time since the wedding, Victor felt something crack in his carefully constructed wall of indifference. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door. Chapter 7. Fault Lines. Victor stood in the hospital corridor, staring through the glass at his daughter. Olivia lay unconscious, tubes and monitors connected to her pale form. The attending physician had just finished briefing him. She would recover physically, but psychiatric evaluation would be mandatory before release. "Mr. Reeves?" Ben approached cautiously, exhaustion evident in his slumped shoulders. "Thank you for coming." Victor nodded, his eyes not leaving Olivia. "What happened?" "I want to check on her after she called me." Sounding disoriented. Found her semi-conscious with an empty pill bottle. Ben ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "She left a note." He handed Victor a folded paper. In Olivia's handwriting. "I can't be caught between them anymore. Dad will never forgive me, and Mom will never stop using me. I'm sorry." Something twisted in Victor's chest, an unfamiliar sensation after weeks of cold calculation. He folded the note carefully, placing it in his pocket. "The doctors pumped her stomach in time," Ben continued. "They're keeping her sedated through the night. You said she called you. After all that's happened?" Ben nodded. "We've been talking again the past few days. After I sent you that hotel video, she tracked me down. She's not the person her mother tried to make her become." A nurse approached, informing them that visiting hours were ending. "I'll return in the morning," Victor told her, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. As they walked to the parking garage, Ben hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Yesterday, Theodore contacted Olivia with a proposition." Victor's eyes narrowed. "What kind of proposition?" "He suggested they could still salvage something from this situation. Said that with your company's safety records in question, a wrongful death lawsuit from a past project could force you to settle everything. There have been no deaths on my projects." He wasn't talking about a construction death. He mentioned someone named Ryan Sullivan. Victor stopped walking, his face draining of color. "When did he contact Olivia about this?" "Yesterday afternoon." She recorded the call. Ryan Sullivan. A name Victor hadn't heard spoken aloud in 26 years. Long before Olivia was born. Before Victor had become successful. Where is this recording? On Olivia's phone. In her hospital room. Victor drove home in silence, memories flooding back that he'd spent decades burying. Ryan Sullivan had been his best friend in college. They'd started their first construction company together, dreaming of building an empire. Then came the accident at their first major project. The investigation that followed. The questions about compromised materials. The insurance settlement that had nearly bankrupted the fledgling company but kept Victor out of prison. Victor had rebuilt from those ashes, creating Reeves Development with lessons learned in blood. No one connected to the company now knew about Ryan Sullivan. No one except Marlene. At dawn, Victor returned to the hospital to find Olivia awake, staring vacantly at the ceiling. "Dad!" Her voice was raspy from the intubation. Victor sat beside her bed. "Ben told me about Theodore's call. I need to hear it." Olivia nodded weakly, pointing to her belongings on the side table. Victor found her phone, located the recording, and pressed play. Theodore's voice emerged, desperate but calculating. "Your father has destroyed my life, my career. I'm facing prison, Olivia. But there's still a way out for all of us. I'm done helping you." Olivia's recorded voice replied. "This isn't about helping me. It's about protecting yourself." Theodore's tone hardened. "Your mother told me about Ryan Sullivan, about what really happened on that construction site in 1999, about how your father covered up his responsibility." "I don't know what you're talking about." "No, you wouldn't. It was before you were born." But Sullivan's family might be very interested to learn new evidence has surfaced about their son's death. Evidence suggesting criminal negligence. You're bluffing. Am I? Ask your mother about the documents she kept as insurance. The originals Victor thought he destroyed. Victor stopped the recording, his face impassive despite the storm raging within. Dad! Olivia's voice pulled him back to the present. Who is Ryan Sullivan? Someone I failed, Victor answered simply. He studied his daughter's face, seeing genuine confusion. You really didn't know about this? Olivia shook her head. Mom never mentioned him. Theodore's call was the first I'd heard that name. Victor sat silent for a long moment, recalibrating his understanding of the situation. Marlene had kept secrets from everyone, deploying them strategically when most beneficial. Did you attempt suicide because of Theodore's threats? He asked directly. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. Not just that. Everything. Being caught between you and Mom. Watching you systematically destroy everyone. Knowing I deserved your hatred for what I did at the wedding. I don't hate you, Olivia. The admission surprised even Victor. I was disappointed. Hurt. The seating was Mom's idea, Olivia whispered. She said it would force a confrontation, make you realize you needed to retire and sell the company. I never imagined you'd just leave. And that's why you agreed? To force my retirement. Mom said you were working yourself to death. That your heart couldn't take the stress much longer. Olivia met his eyes. She told me the doctor gave you 5 years at most if you continued at this pace. Victor exhaled slowly, understanding flooding through him. There's nothing wrong with my heart, Olivia. That was a lie. Olivia's monitors beeped as her heart rate increased. What? Your mother created that fiction to manipulate you. There was never a medical concern. Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks. She told me we were trying to save your life. Victor's phone buzzed with a text from Augie. Tribune front page just dropped. Story running with all evidence. M&T fully exposed. What happens now? Olivia asked, wiping her tears. Victor stood, decision made. Now I deal with Ryan Sullivan's ghost. Once and for all. He left the hospital and drove directly to his former home. Using his key, he'd never returned it despite the divorce proceedings. He entered silently. The house was a mess, evidence of Marlene's deteriorating state since her arrest for DUI and violation of the restraining order. After being released on bail, she'd retreated here, ignoring her attorney's calls according to Augie's reports. Victor moved methodically through the house to Marlene's private study. The safe behind the Georgia O'Keeffe print hadn't been opened in years. Marlene thought Victor didn't know about it. He entered the combination, their wedding date, which she'd never changed. Inside lay a manila envelope labeled simply Ryan. Victor removed it, verifying the contents, original documents from the Sullivan investigation, including material that should have been destroyed decades ago. Notes in Marlene's handwriting showed she'd been researching wrongful death statute limitations recently. As he closed the safe, a voice came from the doorway. I always knew you'd come for that eventually. Marlene stood there, disheveled but sober, a glass of water in her hand. How long have you been planning to use this against me? Victor asked, holding up the envelope. 26 years. Marlene's laugh was hollow. Since the day you came home covered in Ryan's blood, terrified of going to prison. I was cleared by the investigation. Because evidence disappeared. Because Ryan's family settled rather than endure a prolonged legal battle. Marlene stepped into the room. I kept those papers as insurance. In case you ever tried to leave me with nothing. You were the one having an affair, planning to take my company. Because you were never really mine. Marlene's composure cracked. You belonged to your ambition, your projects, your precious reputation. I was just another acquisition. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my dreams, Victor? When did you last notice I was even alive, except to sign documents or appear at business functions? Victor studied the stranger before him, the woman he'd spent half his life with. We built a life together, had a daughter. We built your life, your vision, your legacy. Bitterness dripped from every word. I was young and in love when we married. By the time I realized I'd disappeared into your shadow, it was too late. So you decided to destroy everything. I decided to claim what I deserved. Marlene's eyes flashed. Theodore understood. He saw me, really saw me, when you looked through me for years. Victor held up the Sullivan documents. And these? Were you always planning to betray me with these two? Insurance policy only, Marlene sighed. Until Theodore lost everything because of you. He needs money to fight the charges. The Sullivan family could provide it through a new wrongful death suit. There's a problem with your plan, Victor said calmly. The statute of limitations expired years ago. Not if new evidence emerges of intentional fraud in the original investigation. Then the clock restarts. Marlene's smile was cold. Your perfect reputation, your legacy, all gone. Victor placed the envelope in his jacket. These are coming with me. Take them. Copies are already with my attorney. Victor paused at the door. Olivia nearly died yesterday. Pills. Did you know? Something flickered across Marlene's face. Genuine shock. No, that's not possible. She couldn't bear being caught between us anymore. Victor's voice remained steady, but his eyes blazed. While you plotted with Theodore to destroy me using our daughter as a pawn, she was drowning. Marlene sank into a chair, her glass slipping from her fingers to shatter on the floor. Is she? She'll recover. No thanks to either of us. As Victor walked out, Marlene called after him. What will you do with those papers? Victor didn't answer, closing the door behind him. Chapter 8. Demolition. The following day, Minneapolis awoke to Isabel Kane's explosive front-page expose. Betrayal and revenge. Inside, a family's destruction detailed the entire saga. Marlene's affair, the wedding humiliation, the conspiracy to seize Victor's company, and the failed attempts to discredit him through false allegations. The article was meticulously sourced with emails, recordings, and financial records. Isabel had been careful to present all sides, but the evidence overwhelmingly damned Marlene and Theodore while portraying Victor as the victim of elaborate treachery. By noon, Theodore's attorney had withdrawn from his case after learning his client had attempted to manufacture evidence against Victor. The university board issued a statement distancing themselves further from their disgraced professor. And Marlene's divorce attorney filed a motion to withdraw as counsel, citing irreconcilable differences in case strategy. Victor, however, wasn't celebrating this victory. He sat in his office reviewing the Ryan Sullivan documents, the weight of the past heavy on his shoulders. The young man's death had been ruled an accident, a structural collapse during early-phase construction. The official finding cleared Victor of wrongdoing, but the truth was more complicated. Victor hadn't cut corners intentionally, but he had ignored Ryan's concerns about support beam placements in his rush to complete the project on schedule. When a section collapsed, Ryan was the only one caught in the fall. For 26 years, Victor had built his empire on the foundation of that lesson. Never compromise safety, never ignore warnings, never place profit above people. It had become the cornerstone of Reeves Development's reputation. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Reeves? Samuel Blackthorne is here. Send him in. Samuel entered, newspaper tucked under his arm. Quite an article. The phone's been ringing nonstop with journalists seeking comment. No comments, Victor replied. The story speaks for itself. Agreed. Samuel sat across from him. Marlene's new attorney called. They're ready to accept our original settlement offer. 20% of shared assets. No claim against the company. The offer's no longer on the table. Samuel raised an eyebrow. Victor, that's an excellent deal for you. I'm changing direction. Victor handed him the Sullivan documents. I want you to contact Ryan Sullivan's family. Arrange a meeting. Samuel skimmed the papers, his expression growing grave. Victor, these could restart an investigation. The statute of limitations for wrongful death. I know the legal implications, Victor interrupted. Make the arrangements. After Samuel left, Victor drove to the hospital. Olivia was being discharged, with Ben waiting to take her to his apartment. Her own place held too many memories of wedding preparations and her mother's manipulations. Dad, Olivia looked surprised to see him. I thought after yesterday. We need to talk, but not here. Victor glanced at Ben. I assume you'll be staying with Ben? Ben nodded. For now, until she's back on her feet. I'll come by this evening, Victor told them, then handed Olivia a business card. This is Dr. Elizabeth Winters. She's an excellent psychiatrist. I've arranged for her to see you tomorrow. Olivia accepted the card silently, studying her father's face. The Tribune article. I saw it online. It says what needed to be said. Will you ever forgive me? She asked quietly. Victor considered the question seriously. I'm working on it. That's why I'll come by tonight. There are things you need to know. That evening, in Ben's modest apartment, Victor shared the full Ryan Sullivan story with Olivia. He held nothing back. His recklessness as a young contractor, his friend's death, the investigation that followed, and how that tragedy shaped his business philosophy. Mom knew all this? Olivia asked when he finished. She was there through all of it. Supported me. Helped me rebuild. Victor's expression darkened. I never imagined she'd use it against me someday. And now? What will you do with these documents? Face my past. Make amends where I can. Olivia reached for his hand. The first physical contact they'd shared in months. I'll go with you. When you meet Ryan's family. Victor didn't pull away. This burden is mine alone. No, I'm your daughter. Your legacy includes me. Determination replaced the fragility in her eyes. I want to understand who you really are. All of it. 2 days later, Victor and Olivia sat in a quiet coffee shop in St. Paul, waiting. When the bell above the door chimed, Victor stood to greet a silver-haired woman and a man who bore a striking resemblance to the friend he'd lost decades earlier. Mrs. Sullivan. Michael. Victor extended his hand. Thank you for meeting with us. Catherine Sullivan, now in her 70s, regarded him coolly. After 26 years, I admit I was curious what could possibly bring you to our door. Michael Sullivan, Ryan's younger brother, now older than Ryan had lived to be, nodded stiffly but didn't offer his hand. Once seated, Victor placed the envelope on the table. These are documents from the investigation into Ryan's death. Some were not available during the original proceedings. You mean suppressed? Michael stated flatly. Yes. Victor met his gaze directly. By me. Catherine's hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope, reviewing its contents with Michael. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to shock to quiet anger. These prove you were negligent, Michael finally said. That you ignored safety protocols Ryan had flagged repeatedly. They do. Why show us this now? The statute of limitations expired decades ago. Not if fraud in the original investigation can be proven, Victor said. Which these documents do. Catherine studied him. You're confessing to responsibility for our son's death and providing evidence that could destroy you. Why? Because it's time for the truth. And because I owe it to Ryan. Victor's composure slipped for the first time. Not a day passes that I don't think of him. Not a building rises under my company's name that doesn't honor the lessons his death taught me. Pretty words don't bring back my son, Catherine said. No, nothing can do that. Victor slid another envelope across the table. This contains documentation of a trust established in Ryan's name. $20 million allocated to scholarships for construction, safety, engineering students. And 30% ownership of Reeves Development transferred to the Sullivan family. Michael's eyes widened. This is not compensation, Victor clarified. There can be no compensation. This is acknowledgement and an attempt at justice, however belated. And if we still want to pursue legal action? Catherine asked. That's your right. These documents are yours regardless. Do with them what you believe is just. After the Sullivans left with both envelopes, Olivia turned to her father. 30% of your company? That's worth a fraction of what I owe them, Victor finished. It was always built on Ryan's sacrifice. What happens now? With Mom and Theodore? That chapter is ending, Victor said. Theodore's plea deal includes full restitution to the university and 5 years probation. His academic career is over. And Mom, the divorce will finalize next month. She'll receive what's fair, not what she demanded, but enough to live comfortably. Away from Minneapolis. Olivia nodded slowly. And us? Is there an us after everything that's happened? Victor studied his daughter, seeing both the child he'd raised and the woman who had betrayed him, now seeking redemption. We start over, he said finally, day by day. 2 weeks later, Victor stood at the project demolition construction site, watching as workers poured the foundation for what would become his company's defining achievement. Beside him stood Olivia and Ben, both now working with the project's community outreach program. Ben's idea to rebuild both the neighborhood and their connections to it. His phone buzzed with a text from Augie. Just boarded flight to Phoenix. One-way ticket. Across the site, Catherine and Michael Sullivan consulted with the safety engineers. Their first official act as major shareholders was implementing enhanced protocols that exceeded industry standards. The irony wasn't lost on Victor. Ryan's family now helped ensure no similar accidents would occur on Reeves projects. As concrete flowed into the foundation forms, Victor reflected on foundations of all kinds. Those made of concrete and steel, those built on relationships and trust, those created from painful lessons and hard-won wisdom. His phone rang again. Samuel. Victor, the Sullivan's attorney, called. They've made a decision about the documents. Victor braced himself, and they're donating them to the Construction Safety Institute along with a joint statement acknowledging past mistakes and highlighting reforms. No lawsuit. They're calling it the Ryan Sullivan Legacy Project. Relief washed through Victor, though his expression revealed nothing. Thank you, Samuel. As he ended the call, Olivia approached. Good news. A fair resolution, Victor replied. The only kind that lasts. Behind them, the foundation continued to take shape, stronger than the one before, built on truth this time, designed to endure. Chapter 9. Reconstruction. 1 year after the wedding that never was, Minneapolis's warehouse district had transformed dramatically. Where abandoned buildings once stood, the first phase of project demolition now thrived. Mixed-income apartments, local businesses, and green spaces drawing people back to a once-forgotten neighborhood. Victor walked through the central plaza, noting minor adjustments needed before the grand opening celebration next week. At 60, he still maintained the hands-on approach that had built his company, despite officially stepping back from day-to-day operations 6 months earlier. Dad! Olivia waved from across the plaza, navigating through construction workers with practiced ease. In her role as community engagement director for the project, she'd become a familiar face to everyone on site. The urban garden installation is running ahead of schedule, she reported, falling into step beside him. And the Tenants Association loves the revised community center plans. Victor nodded, allowing himself a small smile of satisfaction. The Sullivan safety protocols are working well. 0 incidents this quarter. Catherine is coming for the opening ceremony. Michael can't make it. His wife is due that week. Their relationship had evolved over the past year, rebuilding slowly through shared work and careful conversations. The easy camaraderie of Olivia's childhood hadn't returned, perhaps never would, but something new had taken its place. A partnership of equals based on hard-earned respect. Any word from your mother? Victor asked as they inspected the newly installed playground equipment. Olivia shook her head. Not since Christmas. The counselor says that's probably for the best right now. Marlene had settled in Arizona, using her divorce settlement to open a small art gallery. The distance, both geographical and emotional, had allowed healing to begin, though reconciliation remained a distant possibility at best. And Theodore? Victor rarely asked about the former professor, but today felt different. Teaching English at a community college in Nevada, according to his sister, under a different name. Olivia studied her father's reaction. Does that bother you? Victor considered the question. No. Justice doesn't require his permanent destruction, just his removal from our lives. They continued their inspection in comfortable silence until Olivia's phone chimed with a text. Ben's finished setting up for tonight, she reported. Everything's ready. That evening, Victor arrived at the model apartment where Ben and Olivia now lived, within the newly completed residential building of Project Demolition. The dinner gathering was small, just Victor, the couple, Catherine Sullivan, and key members of the project team. As Ben poured wine, Catherine raised her glass. To new beginnings built on honest foundations. The toast resonated around the table. Victor had spent the past year making amends where possible, restructuring his company with the Sullivan's input, and creating transparency where once he might have maintained careful control. After dinner, As others engaged in conversation, Victor stepped onto the balcony overlooking the plaza below. The night lights illuminated the project taking shape, his final major development before semi-retirement. Ben joined him, offering a glass of whiskey. Quite a view. Worth every battle, Victor acknowledged, accepting the drink. Olivia wanted me to give you something privately. Ben handed him a small wrap package. Consider it a pre-retirement gift. Inside, Victor found a framed photograph of himself with a very young Olivia on his shoulders at a construction site, both wearing hard hats and smiling broadly. He hadn't seen this image in decades. She found it in a box of her childhood things, Ben explained. From before everything. Victor studied the photograph, memory washing over him. Her first site visit. She was 6. She said it was the happiest day she remembered with you. When you showed her how to read blueprints and let her inspect the foundation. Victor's throat tightened unexpectedly. Thank you for this. Ben hesitated. She's also hoping you'll reconsider walking her down the aisle. When we reschedule the wedding this fall. The engagement had survived the tumultuous year, strengthened rather than broken by the trials they'd endured. The wedding plans were smaller now, more intimate, a celebration rather than a social performance. I'd be honored, Victor said simply. Later that night, alone in his lake house that no longer felt like a fortress, Victor added the framed photograph to his desk. Beside it sat a small model of the project demolition development and a more recent photo of himself with Olivia and the Sullivans at the project groundbreaking. His phone buzzed with an email notification, the final settlement agreement from Samuel. All legal battles concluded, all accounts reconciled, all contracts fulfilled. Victor signed digitally, officially ending the financial entanglements with his past. As he prepared for bed, Victor caught his reflection in the mirror. The past year had aged him, lines etched deeper around his eyes, silver dominating his once dark hair. But something had changed in his expression, the cold calculation replaced by something calmer, more at peace. The man who had walked out of his daughter's wedding with ice in his veins and revenge in his heart was gone. In his place stood someone who understood that true strength lay not in destruction, but in the ability to rebuild from ruins. 3 months later, Victor stood at the back of a small garden ceremony, waiting. This wedding bore little resemblance to the elaborate event planned a year earlier. 40 guests instead of 300. A local restaurant instead of the Hazelwood. No assigned seating, no coat racks. Olivia appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple white dress, her smile genuine as she met his eyes. "Ready?" she asked when she reached him. Victor offered his arm. "Ready." As they moved down the aisle together, Victor caught Catherine Sullivan's approving nod from the second row. The ceremony proceeded without grand speeches or performative emotions, just honest words and genuine promises. At the reception, when time came for the father-daughter dance, Victor led Olivia to the center of the small dance floor. "I never thought we'd have this moment," she admitted quietly as they moved to the music. "Nor did I," Victor acknowledged. "But I'm grateful we do, even after everything, especially after everything." Victor's expression softened. "Buildings aren't the only things that can be rebuilt, Olivia. Sometimes they're stronger for having been broken." As the song ended, guests applauded politely. Victor returned to his table, watching as Ben swept Olivia into their first dance as husband and wife. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from an Arizona number he recognized instantly. "Congratulations to them both. You did well, Victor. M." He read the message twice before responding simply. "Thank you, Marlene." Some foundations couldn't be repaired. Some structures weren't meant to stand again. But from their materials, new construction could rise, different but no less significant. As evening fell and the celebration continued around him, Victor Reeves surveyed the life he'd rebuilt from betrayal's ashes. Not perfect, not without scars, but solid, enduring. True. In the end, that was the only victory that mattered. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. and I'll see you there.